What have you done? Ghazghkull's voice was low. The rumble felt more than it was heard. What did I do? Grotsnik asked with a toothy grin. I'll tell you what I did. I bequeathed my genius to a no-named youth. I stuffed what was left of his brains back in his head. I resurrected him twice, I might add. Or was it 3 times? It don't matter, because once should have been enough. I made you. You were mine. I ain't yours, and you never brought me back. That was the gods. The gods? Grotsnik laughed. The gods. You think they made us? Nah, we made them. And I think you know that. I think you hide behind your title of prophet, but deep inside you know the truth. Gods are us, an ideal we brought into being because we knew it to be true. Orks make gods, not the other way around. All except me. I'm an orc who made himself a god. You're mad. Mad? Nah, I'm real calm. Really, really calm. Calmer than any orc has ever been. Because I took out all that anger, that sizzling hatred. I extracted it, distilled it, refined it. And you know where I put it? My bitterness, my rage. He looked at the creature and smiled, the way a runt herd might smile at a particularly astute grot. The beast was still now, intent on the Grand Warlord. Funny, Volton swore its skin was yellowing even as he watched. There were purplish marks around the back of its head, where a metal plate had been fitted, just above the beginnings of its spinal column. Volton thought he could make out a row of injectors mounted just beneath the skin. Ghazghkull's gaze was fixed upon the creature. That ain't an orc. Orcs are whatever I say they are. Some pretty delicious orc goodness in new Warhammer 40k lore. Today we're having a look at The Mad Doc by Danny Flowers. I really enjoyed this book and I was quite confident I would have a lot to talk about after reading this. Grotsnik is a pretty big deal. The Orks have kind of a special place in Warhammer 40k. They are both punching bag and endgame threat of the setting. Ghazghkull also is this kind of weirdly positioned character where, yes, he has been defeated. Yes, he's had his head cut off by people like Ragnar Blackmane, but he is still the Beast of Armageddon. He is still the character who was prophesied at the end of the War of the Beast, and we know when it comes to the Orks, they might be the punching bags at times, but they can also be one of the greatest threats of the galaxy. And we see this, for example, in the Great Crusade. In fact, I would argue the reason the Great Crusade got underway so quickly, the reason the Emperor was in such a rush during those early days of the Imperium, is because he knew how dangerous the Orks could be. And the Orks had to be defeated at Ulanor. And the Emperor himself, we see nearly die, nearly be killed by an Ork in the story A Wolf of Ash and Fire. And Graham McNeil did confirm the Emperor was in genuine danger there. So Orks grow in power over time. We know the Orc collective consciousness does have these massive effects. It might be true to say that the old Reddit meme of believing something is a gun makes it a gun, or believing people's heads explode will make their heads explode, is a bit of a lie. However, the genesis behind the meme does still remain true. The Orc collective consciousness genuinely can have an impact on reality. Gazghkull could very well one day be a threat to the Emperor of Mankind, and we know this because he will continue to grow in power the more he is challenged. In the early part of his life, Ghazghkull was just another Goth warrior. However, his destiny was violently interrupted when a bolter shell pulped a section of his cranium. He stumbled into Grotsnik's tent, holding his brain in his hands. What followed was 2 gore-splattered hours of surgery. GROTSNIK, employing his patented blend of genius and pure anarchy, replaced the missing brain matter and skullwork with a patchwork of bionics, wires and squig sinew, held together with riveted adamantium plates. The Mad Doc maintains that Ghazghkull's strength sprang entirely from his madness. As the Doc worked deeper into the boy's skull, the voices of the gods spoke ever louder, leading to greater feats. From Ghazghkull's pain, his power grew. GROTSNIK sees the Warlord as a conduit for the Green, or the Warp, as humans refer to it, a flesh vessel where the collective Ork psyche pools. Hilariously, in the new novel, we actually see that GROTSNIK has a name for Ghazghkull to describe this concept, to describe the idea that Ghazghkull has become the center of the Ork race, the center, the vessel for the Ork collective consciousness. Ghazghkull is, according to GROTSNIK, the bucket. He is the bucket of the Orks. The result was quick, unexpected, and devastating. Ghazghkull awoke with a brand new vision. He claimed to be in direct contact with Gork and Mork, chosen to rally all Orkdom on the greatest war the galaxy has ever seen. He became the prophet of Gork and Mork. GROTSNIK watched the meteoric rise of his creation and, of course, took complete credit. He had accidentally replaced a portion of Ghazghkull's brain with raw, unfiltered divine inspiration. When Ghazghkull became the Grand Warlord, GROTSNIK suddenly had long queues of rich knobs demanding the Ghazghkull special. This became a convenient side hustle, as GROTSNIK, now seeing himself as more of a god of flesh crafting, realised that these bionic craniums could be fitted with high explosives and a remote trigger. If a knob happened to annoy him, a nasty case of exploding head would follow, divine justice delivered via remote control. As Ghazghkull is his greatest creation, the Mad Doc intends to continue to challenge the Warlord. As Ghazghkull is still an Ork, and like any Ork, he always needs a new foe to crump, and in doing so he will become stronger each time. Fascinatingly, in the new book, we actually see this happen. The Mad Doc has made some impressive challenges for Ghazghkull before, including a mech Ork. However, in the new story, he decides to go one step further. He creates a Genestealer Ork hybrid. This abomination is incredibly strong, and for a moment you think Ghazghkull might be in trouble. But before GROTSNIK's eyes, Ghazghkull grows in power and grows physically as he fights the abomination. When it tries to spray Ghazghkull with its toxic bile for a second time, the stream evaporates mere inches from Ghazghkull's skin. GROTSNIK, observing this impossible defense, realizes that Ghazghkull was protected not by cunning or bionics, but by his connection to the Green. The Green was flowing into him, sustaining him, replacing whatever Ghazghkull lost, confirming once and for all that his true power lies in his ability to channel the collective psychic energy of the Ork race. Ultimately, the bout proves a success in a way, as Ghazghkull becomes more powerful and in the end tears the abomination into two. So there we have it. Ghazghkull has grown in power once again, but at the end of the story, he does threaten GROTSNIK and tells the Mad Doc that he is no longer going to mess around with Orks in this way, and you can't make something better than an Ork by making it less Ork, which is actually quite a good point from Ghazghkull. So GROTSNIK is, he's just behind the line of being crumped by the Grand War Boss, but for now he is still a massive asset to Ghazghkull, and he has essentially become to see himself as a god. You saw me at the start of this stream play the passage where Ghazghkull and GROTSNIK talk, and it is fascinating from my point of view, because if you're not someone who reads a lot of the books, it might not be clear, but that understanding of what gods are basically puts Ghazghkull's understanding of the warp and godhood above the understanding of characters like the Primarchs in some respects. We, the readers, of course understand how the Chaos Gods were created and where they're from, and I guess in a way, how they're not really technically actually gods, as the Emperor would say. But Most of humanity doesn't really understand this. Of course, the forces of chaos, generally speaking, don't understand this. But for some reason, Grotsnik, this genius orc, has come to realize that Gork and Mork, they didn't create the orcs. They're not the reason that the orcs are so powerful. Gork and Mork exist because of the collective psyche of the orcs. He even says to Gazghkull that he thinks Gazghkull knows this too, and I think he's probably right, which is a fascinating revelation because it tells us that not only does Gazghkull get more and more powerful over time, but he understands why he's becoming more and more powerful. He's starting to understand that he is the bucket of the orcs, and that if he just continues to challenge himself, if he continues to take on more and more enemies, he will become a bigger threat to the Imperium over time. And it keeps me hopeful that we will actually get that Ghazghkull-Angron showdown that we're all waiting to see. At the end of the story, Grotsnik, of course, admits to Ghazghkull that he's not going to go any further with this kind of experimentation between orc DNA and gene stealers, but he's sort of telling a little bit of a fib. Not in the gene stealer cult's way, but at the end of the book, Denny Flowers, he sort of implies that Grotsnik, he's going to try again, because Ghazghkull was created by accident. Grotsnik never intended to make Ghazghkull as powerful as he did, but he did it anyway. He was incredibly successful, and now he thinks, you know what, if I actually try, I could make another Ghazghkull. I can make an orc that could be as powerful as Ghazghkull. And hey, it's a win-win from Grotsnik's point of view, because either he'll make an orc more powerful than Ghazghkull, or he'll make an orc that could challenge Ghazghkull, and Ghazghkull will grow in power as a consequence. So he might as well give it a try. And we actually know the identity of this orc at the end of the book. The orc is known as Vaughton the Patient, and as you might imagine, the Patient is not a term of endearment amongst the orc race. In fact, it's a mocking name, right? Because of course he's not getting stuck in as all orc beast snaggers should do. However, he has submitted himself to Grotsnik at the end of the novel, because Grotsnik now thinks he can turn Vaughton into something as powerful, potentially, as Ghazghkull. And we sort of get a development on the lore here as well. The orcs get this technology, this kind of soul-catching technology of the Drukhari. And when Ghazghkull fights against the Abomination, this orc gene stealer abomination, the Abomination, of course, tears all these holes in Ghazghkull, and Grotsnik talks about how the bucket has got holes in it and the green is kind of leaking out. And so Grotsnik actually uses this Drukhari technology to kind of capture this green energy, this kind of green soul energy of Ghazghkull. And at the end of the book, it very much implies that that has been implanted into Vaughton. And so Vaughton is going to become a bucket as well, is Grotsnik's plan. Grotsnik is going to try and create something as powerful as his greatest creation, Ghazghkull. Now, of course, on this channel, we believe Ghazghkull will always remain the biggest and the best, but I really hope they continue with this plotline, because this is pretty cool. I would love to see a genuine challenge to Ghazghkull. Of course, in Ghazghkull's lore, as he was growing over time, there weren't many bosses that challenged him, but there haven't been many proper, civil war challenges within the orc race to Ghazghkull so far in orc lore. And so an actual genuine threat to Ghazghkull would be a great plot line, and also would go a long way to explaining how Ghazghkull is going to become a threat to not just Guilliman, not just the Lion, but perhaps even the Emperor someday, because that lore is still there's no cap on orcs. That's the thing about orcs. There's no limit. As Ghazghkull fights more and more, as he continually challenges himself, he will become the biggest boss in the galaxy and will ultimately take over the entire Imperium unless he is stopped. And so far, the Imperium hasn't managed to do it. So yeah, absolutely great book. I hope Denny Flowers gives us a follow-up, because yeah, we want to see Ghazghkull go from strength to strength. We want to see him challenged, and I really enjoyed the Mad Doc story as well. It's kind of fascinating. One of the interesting things about the Mad Doc in the book is that, and you might have noticed this at the start of the video, Grotsnik kind of talks in full sentences in the book, because he's not as dumb as the other orcs. He's incredibly smart. So he talks in full sentences, and he is basically the orc version of Belisarius Cawl, because if he runs into any other brain boys, any other docs that are also incredibly intelligent, he'll often kill them, take bits of their brain, and graft it into his brain to make him more and more powerful. He's an orky version of Belisarius Cawl, who's kind of done a similar thing, but without the brutality, I guess, of the orc race. Hey Sandman, do you think we will ever see Orks again? The Beast has been the closest to them returning. Right. So you are right. I guess the Beast was, you know, the Beasts, they were the closest that we've seen. In a way, we don't really need to see the Krork return, because the thing about the Krork is that outside of this suggestion that their technology was significantly better than the Orks, the Krork are only a necessary component for creating of elevating the Orks to a higher level. And the Orks are being elevated to a higher level as they are continually challenged, as Ghazghkull becomes more and more powerful. But it would be really interesting. I would love a plotline of, you know, Ghazghkull versus a Krork. You know, maybe one gets released from Trajan's museum, or maybe, like, you know, Belisarius Cawl messes around with time and one of them gets thrown into modern times or something like that. Like, yeah, there's definitely something you could do in that respect. But I don't think you actually have to return the Krork. One of the really interesting little kind of orc plot lines that is hinted at in multiple books is this suggestion that the Gretchen were the Grots, they were the original leaders of the Orks. And they were what was behind the intelligence of the Krork and the reason they were able to accomplish so many incredible feats. And it was as the Grots were beaten into a lower caste within the orc race that the orcs fell apart, because the Grots were a significant part of orc society, or Krork society. How bad are you feeling being the guy that fired the bolt shell? Yes, true. I mean, I guess this is sort of the point of Ghazghkull stories, that they never name the Space Marine, they never name the Space Marine chapter. They just say it was a random Space Marine one day who fired a bolt shell at a random unnamed orc boy, and because he blew out a part of that orc boy's brains, that orc boy would become Ghazghkull Thraka. And it's not even clear that his name was Ghazghkull Thraka before. In fact, GROTSNIK calls him a no-named youth. So maybe he couldn't even remember who he was before. But I guess it's sort of like Ghazghkull is in a way similar to the Emperor, and how the Emperor is like a force of nature. Ghazghkull is a force of nature for the Orcs. He is the Orcs, you know. I wonder if Krork are capped, or if they evolve and scale infinitely. Yeah, I mean, they would presumably scale too. I mean, I guess what the Orcs are is a biological weapon of the old ones, you know, and this is what Fabius Baal talks about in his novel, where it's the Orcs seem to have been designed. They seem to have been designed to be the perfect species to take over the galaxy, and they were a big pain for the Eldar to get rid of, and perhaps even the Eldar were never able to properly extinct the Orcs, and that's why they still persist today, because they are nigh on impossible to remove from a planet without a lot of fire. Will the Imperium make yet another Octarius sector, goading the Orcs to fight over Sanctuary, since Leontus has no other options to defend it? I don't think they do that again, but maybe there'll be an equivalent. I feel like because the Necrons and Tyranids have been built up so much, I think that there's an obvious solution to that problem in having the Tyranids and the Necrons fighting against one another, and that would go some way to dealing with those problems and giving Guilliman a bit of breathing room at some point in the future. What power level would you put the Orc war boss that fought Horus / the Emperor? Definitely more powerful than a normal Primarch. I would definitely put him above a normal Primarch. Not obviously God Horus, but between a Primarch and the Emperor in Ulanor. I think the Emperor was the more powerful of the two of them. Once Horus saves the Emperor deals with the Orc pretty quickly. But yeah, the Emperor basically rushes in too quickly, which is why he's in danger. And fascinatingly, the Emperor directly intervenes to save Abaddon's life, which I love. Always love that bit. Is there much known about Valton the Patient? He was originally a beast snagger, famously patient, so got very bullied for that. And then he ends up kind of being drawn into Grotsnik's service, and he's the one that gets the Drukhari device. And at the end of the book, it looks like that, I talk about that green energy that Grotsnik stole from Ghazghkull, that has been, I think, put into his eye. So his eye glows green, and he has asked one of his grots to continually return to him over time, because as we see with Ghazghkull, Grotsnik wanted Ghazghkull to be his creation and was upset when Ghazghkull kind of became his own man. So Vautun has been forward-thinking enough that he understands that Grotsnik is going to try and control him. So what he has done is asked this grot to return to him every few days and repeat to him his name, so that Vautun can remember his name, remember who he is, and remain his own orc. And so he's quite an interesting character. So he's not just going to be a throwaway character. I'm pretty certain he's going to remain something that we'll see in the near future. What do you think of the likelihood of Yarrick having been falsely reported as dead and coming back to fight Gaz on Armageddon, and conversely the Orcs going after Angron on suspicion of killing him? I'm hopeful for both. I mean, to clarify, the reason it's funny is because they actually haven't set up Ghazghkull Angron at all. They didn't write anything around that. So basically Yarrick died, and then they released Angron, and on Angron is a skull that kind of looks like Yarrick. The fans saw that, and when Angron killed Yarrick, Ghazghkull's not going to be happy, the showdown's going to happen. And whilst there's actually no lore to suggest this is real, I think that it's such a fun idea that the writers will have noticed, and people were pretty loud about it. So I reckon there's a good chance that does actually happen. In addition to that, in terms of Yarrick returning, that seems pretty likely. I think that almost certainly, because he's such a popular character, and they already got rid of Creed, and sort of got rid of Creed, and they definitely got rid of Kel. So I think it's pretty likely that Yarrick will come back. I don't think they want to get rid of all of the old characters, because having humans that live for centuries isn't really a problem in 40k, because there are various rejuvenate treatments. I like Gaz, but how many fake out deaths is too much? Would you accept more? I get it. I get where you're coming from. I guess this is one of those things where to the writers it makes a lot of sense, right? The idea that Ghazghkull keeps being defeated and then comes back stronger and stronger makes a lot of sense in the lore, because that's how orcs work. But at the same time, from a fan point of view, it looks a bit shit to have him be defeated by Ragnar Blackmane, and seems a bit weird to have Ragnar Blackmane kind of defeat him, and then in pretty much his next novel, we're talking about how he's becoming more and more powerful and is going to become kind of the center of the orc race, and Grotsnik has a vision of Ghazghkull kind of consuming the entire galaxy, right? So it seems a bit silly to have that following a novel, Ghazghkull by Nate Crowley, where he is defeated basically by Ragnar Blackmane. I think you're going to get a bit of both. I think it would be good, for example, to have Ghazghkull be defeated by a Primarch so he can come back and be more powerful. Or for example, maybe they just need to give him some victories in the meantime. For example, in the next book, next time Ghazghkull has a fight, we could have him fight both Ragnar and Helbrecht together, because Helbrecht also wants to kill Ghazghkull. You could have Ragnar and Helbrecht teaming up to fight Ghazghkull, and this time Ghazghkull just wipes the floor with them, and they barely survive. And that kind of shows you how Ghazghkull has been elevated. You can have him go on to maybe fight Guilliman. Maybe he loses to Guilliman or the Lion. However, then he grows and becomes more powerful, and he comes back, and then he's able to defeat Angron. I'm fine with Ghazghkull continuing to lose, but he needs to come back and get some victories, or else you are right. His journey just seems a bit hollow, really. If he's just a character that is supposedly becoming more powerful in the background, but every time we see him in battle he loses, yeah, that sucks. So there we have it. Ghazghkull may have a rival in the near future. Vautun the Patient will be on the rise, but ultimately Grotsnik is really the god of the orcs. He is the person behind the great bucket of their race, the center of the orc gestalt, connected consciousness, which is Ghazghkull meteoric Thraka. So I really like this book. I really am interested to see where the orcs go in the near future. I hope Ghazghkull does get some big wins against other major characters, because let's face it, he deserves it, and he got done incredibly badly when he lost to Ragnar. So Come on, Games Workshop, give us the Ragnar. So come on, Games Workshop, give us the Ghazghkull Angron fight that we all want to see and the inevitable turn of Commissar Yarrick. Thank you so much for watching this video, everybody. If you enjoy this kind of content, please do consider liking and subscribing and even joining the channel if you want extra content and to get access to the Discord, etc., etc. Thank you so much to everybody that supports the channel. I'm so glad people are enjoying the videos I'm putting out, and I'll see you next time.